They called her the Priestess of Debauchery. She was one of the most shocking and honestly symbolic figures of 1920s Germany. Today, we're going to dive into the life of the dancer, actor, and icon, Anita Berber, a life that was like a flash of brilliance and chaos, and one that perfectly captured the wild spirit of the Weimar Republic. Okay, so picture this. It's Berlin in the roaring 20s. You're standing in the lobby of the Adlon, the most luxurious hotel in the entire city. And all of a sudden, this woman with a wild shock of red hair, a fur coat, and a pet monkey on her shoulder just dances right through the lobby. Then she opens her coat, and yep, she is completely naked underneath. Can you imagine? The men are staring, the women are gasping. Well, that woman was Anita Berber. She was known as the goddess of the night, the priestess of debauchery. But who was the real person behind all that scandal? I mean, was she this liberated artist just pushing boundaries? Or was she a tragic product of a totally broken society? Let's get into it. Now, to understand the icon, the scandalous figure, you first have to understand that she was a trained artist. You see, her story doesn't begin in some smoky, dark cabaret. It actually starts in a classical dance school. So, looking at her early years, her path to stardom was, surprisingly conventional at first. She was born to musician parents, so she was totally immersed in the arts from day one. By the time she was 14, she was studying dance seriously, and by 17, she was already making her debut in Berlin. And this classical foundation is so crucial because it shows that all the shocking stuff she did later, that was a deliberate choice, not because she lacked training. So once she hit Berlin, that classical training pretty quickly morphed into something way, way more radical. She didn't just, join the city's nightlife. She basically became its queen. I mean, she did it all. She was a dancer, blending ballet with these really provocative styles. She was an actor, starring in 25 films, almost always as a temptress. And she was a total fashion icon. That signature look, the dark bob, the super dramatic makeup, it was so influential that huge stars like Marlene Dietrich would later copy it. And the nicknames she got kind of tell the whole story. Goddess of the night, priestess of debauchery. She wasn't just a performer, she was a phenomenon. This quote from a fellow choreographer, Joe Gency, is just so revealing. He said, "The public never saw her art, they only saw her scandals." He called her performances a self-vivisection. I mean, think about that. A public dissection of her own life. She wasn't just playing a part on stage. She was intentionally blurring that line, sacrificing her personal self for her art in the most destructive way you can imagine. But you have to ask, why was there such a huge appetite for this kind of self-destruction? Well, to really understand Anita Berber, you have to understand the world she lived in, the chaotic, desperate, and decadent Weimar Republic. So after World War I, Germany was absolutely crushed by a reparations debt of 50 billion marks. And look, this wasn't just some number on a page. This was the catalyst for a total economic collapse and hyperinflation that completely upended every single person's life. And this right here, this shows you the human cost. Just look at this chart. In 1913, the average German ate 52 kilograms of meat a year. By 1922, that had dropped to just 22 kilograms, less than half. People were literally starving. The entire economy was in shambles. And that's the crucial point, right? When your money is worthless and people are starving, society starts to break down. The constant news of death from the war created this feeling of absolute recklessness. I mean, why bother planning for the future when there might not even be one? This chaos created the perfect storm for a figure like Anita Berber to not only exist, but to thrive, and ultimately to burn out. The very same forces that made her a star also guaranteed her destruction. Her art and her addictions, they really became one and the same, and it all led to a really rapid and tragic fall from grace. Her drug use was, well, it was legendary and extreme. Cocaine was her favorite. She famously kept it in a silver locket around her neck, which is how she got the nickname the Snow Queen. But it didn't stop there. Opium, heroin, alcohol. She'd even throw champagne bottles at audiences if she felt they weren't appreciating her. And maybe the most bizarre thing of all, she would mix ether and chloroform in a bowl with rose petals and then eat the petals, one by one. Her most notorious performance was a dance literally called cocaine. She'd start on the floor, totally paralyzed. Then her body would slowly start to unravel in these convulsions, with different parts moving in conflicting rhythms.
It was a physical representation of the body fighting poison, and the dance ended with her trying to scream, her mouth open in this silent blood-red gape, before she would just collapse, motionless. She literally turned the horror of addiction into art. By 1925, all those years of abuse and frantic living were taking a heavy, heavy toll. The famous artist Otto Dix painted her portrait that year, and it is a truly shocking piece of work. It shows this gaunt, aged figure, just ravaged by her lifestyle. It honestly looks like a portrait of a woman in her 50s.
But she wasn't in her 50s, she was 25 years old. Just let that sink in for a second. The very lifestyle that made her an icon had aged her decades in just a few short years. As her addiction spiraled out of control, her behavior became more and more erratic, and even violent. The same audiences that had once celebrated her for being so shocking, well, now they found her unbearable. Eventually, she was banned by the International Artists Union, which was basically a professional death sentence. It forced her to leave Europe just to find work. So, how should we remember Anita Berber? Her life was so short and so tragic, but her legacy is incredibly complex, and honestly, it continues to fascinate people even today.
While she was on tour in Damascus, she collapsed on stage. The diagnosis was tuberculosis. She made it back to Berlin, but it was too late. She died in a hospital in November 1928, surrounded by empty morphine syringes. She was only 29 years old, and she was buried in a pauper's grave.
You know, today, a lot of people look back at her and they see this counterculture hero. It's a really common modern take, you know? Isn't she so free? Isn't she so cool? Such a hedonist. The idea that she lived life entirely on her own terms, a symbol of liberation. But let's actually contrast that myth with the reality. A liberated icon, or a woman suffering from a severe addiction who was eventually banned from her own profession, who died at 29 and was buried in an unmarked grave. The very society that celebrated her debauchery also tolerated her decline and then completely discarded her. And that's really the central question her life leaves us with. Was Anita Berber a truly free spirit pushing the boundaries of art and society, or was she a tragic victim, chewed up and spit out by the very era that created her? The answer, just like the woman herself, is probably somewhere in between.